Jenny and I both got back into the red bus and travelled further down to a different part of the city, still trying to find other survivors, if there were any. But it came with a sense of unease as well, for we did not know whether all that survived were the same as us or those who attacked me, whether this disease, whatever it was, had various outcomes, whether anyone else was immune like us, and what had made us immune. The night was calling in, and we stopped the red bus outside what looked like an old hospital. The doors flapped in the wind and paper flew down the street, which, like all the city, was most quiet and still. Inside the hospital was unlit. We felt this would be a good place to rest for the night, and we could get some supplies which we might need in an emergency. Jenny turned on her torch and lit the way. The corridor was long and branched off into two directions. The sign above read Outpatients Waiting Room. We looked around the rooms there, all empty and untouched, even half a cup of cold tea on a desk, a pen without its lid, and a tap dripping endlessly. It felt odd to be in this hospital all alone, and it was strange to see it all abandoned. These buildings without life seemed to themselves to gain some kind of character. Maybe it was just that these buildings were all that remained from our lives, the only constant, the fixed point. And yet, walking down long corridors, empty rooms, empty lifts, empty surgery rooms, all the machines flashing and beeping, but no patients to treat, it felt like being a kid exploring a place that where only adults are, running down the corridors and up the stairs through wards and wards, beds empty, as if it was an abandoned building waiting to be torn down. We both sat down in one of the wards. It was strange that all was empty, we thought, but looking at the condition of this part of the hospital, it seemed that it must have been unused for some time now, even before the great calamity had hit this city, removing any possible need ever again for any kind of hospital treatment to take place. Jenny told me of her childhood, how different I thought it was of mine. She told me that she had been popular and well-liked, that she married at a young age, but that didn't work out. She never thought about trying again. She told me that she had a daughter who would have been 5, but said when she awoke in her bed a few days ago, when this whole horrible thing had started, she found her baby dead in her arms, bleeding from the nose and ears. She said she buried her in the garden by her favourite swing, put a rose to mark the spot, and moved on in search of someone that she said is when she found me. I took Jenny's hand and held it tight, and wanted to say something meaningful, wanted to reassure her, give her some hope, tell her that I was here for her. But who was I? And what was I here for? I wanted to tell her how I felt, that even though we knew each other for such a short time, that I loved her, and yet I could not speak. I said not a word, as if my heart was sealed from the mouth up, yet inside I knew that perhaps this was not love, that perhaps I felt only this natural urge to stay alive, that she was the only woman there, and that we'd been thrown together by fate, and that these feelings were nothing more. I told Jenny of my childhood, and how I hated school, and joked that as a kid I used to say that after I left that school I would go back one day and blow it up. Jenny laughed and said to me, "Why don't you?" I laughed, but on seeing Jenny's enthusiasm and forgetfulness of her own problems, I decided, why not? In the morning, we'll find some explosives and blow that bloody thing to the ground. Jenny and I were just getting into the hospital beds when we heard a pane of glass break in the distance. We both looked at each other. The hospital. It must have been from the building next to this one. We quickly rushed out of the bed and down the 3 flights of stairs to the main entrance. Across the car park was the other wing of the hospital. High up, maybe the 7th floor, the lights were on. "Then there are patients alive over there," Jenny said. "But we don't know what state they're in. Maybe they're like us. Maybe they're not." We had no time to make a clear decision. We bolted down the car park, slid open the electronic door to the hospital, and entered the lift to the 7th floor. The door slowly opened. We walked out of the lift to the opening of the ward, and there was greeted by rows and rows of patients, wailing and crying. We walked down the pathway looking left and right at all the beds. Some of the patients were dead. Blood-stained sheets covering their bodies revealed that. Doctors and nurses lay dead on the ground by their sides. Some patients must have been on their last gasp of life as their medicines ran out. How long had they gone there without treatment? Why are they strapped down? Inquired Jenny. What did she mean? I looked at the bed I was next to, and indeed the patient was strapped up. Then I quickly ran to the next bed, and it was the same, and the next, and the next. All of the patients are strapped up. Something's wrong here. But before I had time to grab Jenny's arm and run out, a group of men dressed in doctors' white coats revealed themselves from the far end of the ward. I turned to run to the door, but they were there too, and one of them had hold of Jenny, a knife to her throat.